yeah, we're a photography agency, and we kind of pride ourselves in creating work from start to finish. But if you have interests in other things, I say, why not? The
Mhm.
thing is, like, you won't ever know until you try it, because if you don't value yourself, how do you expect other people to, you
Mhm.
know?
Hey everyone, how's it going? On this episode of the KDigitals podcast, I have my guest Arabela Espinoza. How you doing, Arabella?
Hi, good. How are you?
Doing well. Just hanging out on the weekend with the weekend creative. Well, cool. On the like I mentioned before we started, the kind of the purpose of this podcast really is to interview other artists, dive into their origins, their thought process, and even kind of approach how they approach even like the business side of things. Obviously, art is more than just creating, right?
Yes, yes.
Um, and so before I kick it off, Arabella, I'd love to, when I do these podcasts, I always like to ask the guests to really define who they are, right? Whether you're a
Hmm.
photographer or a designer or a business owner, what's your version of yourself?
Yeah, so I actually have a partner. So we're Weekend Creative. We are a photography agency based here in the South Bay. We are a duo in the sense that I'm the photographer and she's the art director. So our roles are pretty well defined, thankfully.
Mhm.
And but primarily our work is in photography, and we focus mostly on creating imagery for like other brands and businesses, so very like B2B, I guess is what you would say it. But we kind of tend to focus on creating really like beautiful, unique work that involves a lot more customization. So, when it comes to like our sets and like the props that we use and the styling, so it's not your typical, product photography where there's a white background or like, lifestyle work or anything like that. It's very like, art directed heavily, and so we also like I feel like even recently we
Mhm.
kind of discovered what our style was too, and it's very much to do with the weekend. Like we love the
Okay.
weekend, we love, our California sun, and so we like to incorporate a lot of fun shadows into our work, and very kind of that just kind of like bright, fun, and colorful style that we love and enjoy. So, but yeah, we're a photography agency, and we kind of pride ourselves in creating work from start to finish. So we communicate with clients, we take them over to, the concepts, and then, my partner does all of that pre-production, and then, building out the sets, building out the props, and then we kind of both tag team together to shoot day of,
Mhm.
and then I kind of take care of all the post-production. So I take it over, I do a lot of the photography and the lighting, and then yeah, and then I do all the editing, and then we deliver to clients. So we kind of keep it really small. It's just us two primarily. Here and there we'll have like, assistants or anything, but for the most part it's
Mhm.
pretty small, and it's just us two. So yeah, we've been doing this thing for about let's see, it's going to be 3 years this January.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's
Cool.
that's what we do.
Which sound is a lot, right?
Yeah.
It's nothing, for like one person, you're trying to do it to two. It's like, I feel like for two people, like that's probably like five people's worth of work. How do you sleep? Do you guys drink coffee? Like,
I know. I mean, it's kind of funny because there's like this running joke that I'm kind of the night owl, the one that like never sleeps.
Mhm.
So I'm usually here in the office, like, in the evenings. We actually like my partner, she likes to come in earlier and like leave earlier. I like to come in like, a little bit later and leave later. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, I mean, it's kind of crazy. When we first started, it was very much like, okay, this is, we're doing product photography. Um, but then slowly over time, I think we like expanded in a lot of things that we do now. It's very much like Weekend Creative has turned from like a photography agency to kind of like almost like a brand in itself, because so when we first started, we realized that like, well, first of all, I mean, the way that it really started was it was all a joke, kind of. My partner and I met in college. And so we met
Mhm.
in a studio lighting class. Um, yeah, I just remember we became partners for the semester. And then she was working at the time at this magazine called Content Magazine. I don't know if you're
Mhm.
familiar, but so
Mhm.
they do arts and culture, and they feature all these people. And so she was working for them at the time, and she told me about them, and I was like, this is so cool. And, I do photography. That's what I do. And so
Mm-hmm.
she's like, yeah, like, let's bring you along. And so I started interning for them, and then we started working on the magazine together, and slowly we started working on editorials together. So we actually started in fashion, working
Okay.
together on fashion editorials. And so from there, I think we just were kind of like, when you work for someone else, you sometimes want to stray, right? Because you're like, oh, like you're under somebody else's direction. You want to do your own
Yeah.
thing. And so that's kind of what had happened. And we were always joking around and being like, what if we started our own business? What if we like did our own thing? And for 2 years we were joking about this thing. And
Mm-hmm.
eventually it happened. It was all kind of very
Yeah.
natural and organic, but then it happened, right? And it was by accident that we never actually set out to, we never really like identified like, okay, this is the type of photography that we want to do. We just
Mm-hmm.
suddenly sat down and we were like, okay, like what are brands that we can reach out to for them to send us like free stuff, and then we'll shoot it. At the time we weren't even thinking about getting paid. We were just
Mm-hmm.
like, well, who can we reach out? And so It's It Ice Cream is actually like, here in Burlingame or wherever they're at. And so we
Mm-hmm.
like sent them an email. It was totally on a whim, and they responded, and they're like, yeah, like we'll send you ice cream sandwiches, like, or whatever, like. And
Yeah.
then we were like, okay, cool, great, free ice cream. We're just like, okay. And then what ended up happening was throughout that conversation with that company, they were like, actually, we have like a couple more things that we actually want. Can we pay you? And we were like, okay, like we're
I'll
not
take
going
the
to say
money.
no.
Yeah, I'll do it for free. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that was like the first inkling of us realizing that this could be a business and this could be something that we could do. And
Mm-hmm.
so it was really weird. Yeah, we never were like, we're going to do product photography. It was just like, it just happened. And we naturally fell into our roles too, based on like how we worked together at content. She was art directing and styling and doing all of that. And I was the one photographing, editing, doing the lighting. And so it was
Mm-hmm.
very natural how that happened. But then, so as we got into this, product photography business, we were like, oh my God, like there's not really much out there for product photographers to learn, like the ins and outs of like, the technical stuff, the styling stuff. There's not like
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of things that were missing. And even just like a creative business, there's not really a whole lot of resources out there. And so that's kind of where we started our blog. And so we started our blog kind of at first documenting our journey and like sharing everything that we were learning, as a way for us to kind of like a time capsule in a sense, just like
Okay.
we're journaling what we're learning and all this stuff. And then it became very much
Mm-hmm.
like a place, where people could come and learn, about
Mm-hmm.
product photography and running your own business. And
Mm-hmm.
so since then it's just expanded even more. And now, we've really expanded like the educational side of our business. So we offer a lot of resources. We have a shop for downloads. Our blog is, we keep it consistent. We've, since we started it, and, we focus on photography resources, tips, business and creative business, you know, tips, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, so that's kind of happened. And we've also started like a community too, which is really cool. I don't know if you're familiar with Patreon, but we started a Patreon, and people can join, and we offer exclusive content on that community. So
Mm-hmm.
we really focused a lot on education, especially this year, I think. And yeah, it's been really cool. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I guess. And then with that too, because there's so much education involved and so much, like wanting to feel like we're not alone in this creative journey. Cause I feel like that's what kind of happens for a
Mm-hmm.
lot of artists and creatives, like especially if you're working by yourself. I mean, thankfully I have my partner, Elle.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's kind of where our podcast kind of came about, which is a
Mm-hmm.
freelancing comedy podcast. And it's kind of, you know, it's education, but also like a way to like de-stress, because we're sharing about
Just
client
unwinding.
stories.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Unwinding. And yeah, it's been really fun to kind of have all these elements that all kind of like weave through and are like work together, with like, here's our product photography business, here's the educational portion
Mm-hmm.
of Weekend Creative, and then also there is the podcast, which is kind of just like a fun little way of like building community and sharing and all the things that freelancers do, go through. So yeah,
Hmm.
that's the rundown. It's kind of a lot, but
Hmm. Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, as you were
Okay.
saying, we do a lot of coffee.
For sure. Well, so I have a question for you. Maybe I'd love to get your thoughts on this, right?
Yeah.
So I'm originally from LA.
Oh, awesome.
And when I was there, I'm in San Jose now, right?
Hmm.
And I was trying to do like video and photography and then trying to get into fashion just to learn how that mindset worked. And then when I came over here to the Bay, and one of the first people like you said, early mentors I talked to, um, was like, oh, it sounds like you're trying to be creative and to do all these different things, right? You have a business, you're trying to
Hmm.
do a podcast, you guys are doing photography, but that's not how it works up here. You have to be hyper focused. But the more I get and go back in the creative realm, it seems like being the jack of all trades or being able to dance from different styles to another is necessary. I mean, you grew up here, I'm assuming, in San Jose, in the Bay Area. And so you
Hmm.
get the blend of both the tech rise, but you also have like the artsy side of things.
Yes,
I guess,
yes.
what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean it's kind of crazy. Yeah, so I did grow up here. I grew up in East Side San Jose.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I mean it was always really interesting. I mean even just for me personally growing up in this area, like it is very much like a thing that gets thrown at you, like, get into the tech industry or like sometimes like I feel like um I didn't really get a sense of the artist or creative community in San Jose until I was older.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And until I found things, right? Like it was like probably in college, really, like when, and maybe that's part of my own fault, not exploring or like, putting myself out there. But, as soon as like
Mm-hmm.
I heard about content, that's where I really got connected. And like, but yeah, I mean, it is really hard. I mean, like we are very overshadowed by the tech industry, but there is a creative community here. It's just you have to it's small, and you have to find those people and get connected with those people. Um
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, I definitely, it's interesting how what you were talking about, like coming from LA, and like it's so interesting. I mean, even like when we talk to, because we have like coaching calls,
Mm-hmm.
and we consult other photographers, and we always hear that kind of very similar things about like people who feel like they need to be in a niche or that they need to like do a lot of things. And like the thing that we always say is like, for us personally, it made sense for us to just stick to photography and just kind of like do that thing. If anything, like all these other things that we're in, as far as like, our educational resources and the podcast, like there's still, it's still all part of it. It's just, it's if anything, we look at it as more of like diversifying our income and like, building up our passive income. It's still all
Mm-hmm.
part of the same thing. But I remember when we were first starting our business, we were kind of like, okay, like it'd be kind of cool if like, at some point we could expand and add branding and add graphic design and web design. You know what I mean? Like we were thinking like, oh, we'd
Mm-hmm.
build our agency full out, but then we were like, but you know what? We're really, or video, we're really good at photography. Like, let's just like, pick that and do it well. But from talking to other people, like in our coaching calls, like we've discovered that, there's people who love doing separate things, different things, and touching their toes and, dipping their toes in other areas of, creative
Mm-hmm.
fields. And so I think at the end of the day, it's kind of more of like, what can you do? Like, what can you what is physically possible for you to do? And if you love it, I say, we're very like, we're multifaceted individuals. So like it's normal, I think, to want to do multiple things. It's just more
Mm-hmm.
about being realistic about what you can take on. And,
Mm-hmm.
you know, yeah, at the end of the day, it's just like whatever makes you happy. Is like, if it makes you happy to kind of do multiple things, and like why not, we've
Mm-hmm.
just found for ourselves that it's kind of easier to think about one thing at a time.
Yeah, for sure. No, that's what,
Yeah.
and that I get it too, right? Like I think if you mentioned like if you just hyper focus, you're really good at that, then that will grow and you won't have to worry about this other stuff. But then,
Yeah, yeah. But if you have interests in other things, I say why not, the
hmm
thing is, like, you won't ever know until you try it.
hmm
Yeah.
That's the soundbite I'm going to use for the opening of this podcast. Very
Yeah.
cool. Well, so on that note, photography, right? To kind of pull the camera back. So then, how did you get started with doing photography in the first place?
So I think I might have, I mean, I think I was really young. And me personally, Ellie actually doesn't really like photograph. She did, she does photography. Like she can definitely shoot. But she
Hmm.
prefers kind of more the stylistic and the art directing and doing all the
Hmm.
concepts and stuff like that. So I have been doing photography for, I don't know, as long as I can remember. But from, I think it might have been, it was really cool. So I used to like growing up, my mom, like she's always worked. She just hit her 25th anniversary at her company. And so
That consistency.
it's so crazy. Yeah. And so at this company, she's just like worked crazy long hours. And
Hmm.
so she would be kind of one of those moms that would pick me up at 6 p.m. So I would, in growing up in my own elementary school, I would have
Hmm.
to do the after school program so that my mom could
Hmm.
pick me up like later. And
Yeah,
I
I
remember
get
hating it at
it.
first. I remember hating it at first. I don't know why. It just always was like, oh, like, why can't I go home at 3 p.m. or 2 p.m. or whatever it was? But
Hmm.
anyway, it ended up being really awesome because there were so many classes in the after school programs that were like really fun, dance, photography, art, all this kind of stuff. And I vividly remember, I think it might have been third or fourth grade, that there was this one class that I took in the after school program that was a Polaroid class. And it was like a Polaroid class where you like manipulated the Polaroid, and it was like really cool. I just was like amazed by this thing that came out of the camera, like right then and there. And I think that was like my first, like, oh, I like this medium, I want to like learn
Mm.
more about this. And so I think as I grew, I got my first camera, I think late middle school, early high school. And it was just like I think it might have been like a Canon PowerShot S5IS or something like that. And I just remember taking it everywhere. And I think that's kind of where things started. For the longest time though, I never took it seriously. Like I never
Hmm.
made it like something that I was charging people or anything. I just did it for fun. I think because it was a passion, I felt weird taking money at the time. Like it just didn't feel right because I was like, I love doing it. So why do I need to charge you,
Hmm.
but then slowly I think people were like, no, like we need to pay you. Like it's fine. And so I think in college is when it really took off, and I did a lot of portraits. Kind of started out in like the portraits um,
Hmm.
field. And then slowly just expanded and kept going with it. But yeah, I mean, I'm so thankful that I met Ellie, and that was something that like
Hmm.
really changed everything for me as far as like, oh my God, like here's somebody that I work really well with, and like our roles are defined, in the sense that we're
Hmm.
not stepping on each other's toes,
Hmm.
because I think it'd be hard if we were like two photographers trying to work in an agency. You know what I
Mm.
mean? Like, so
Hmm.
yeah, yeah. So I think that's how it started. It's kind of a weird, long, you know, drawn out
Well,
passion that slowly turned into something more serious.
yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. No, it's cool. So then when you mentioned like you were kind of getting started doing all this, and you kind of fast forward, you went to college, then you were working for content, and now you're doing your own thing. But you kind of mentioned during your time at weekend, that's when you kind of developed your style.
Yeah.
Was that like is that sorry, I didn't cut you off. Is that a
No,
separate
no.
style from like your personal style, or is like your personal style is the weekend creative style?
So that's where it's kind of fun, like kind of interesting, because I've actually still remained to do my own personal work while
Hmm.
doing weekend creative, because when I think of like the work that I've done leading up to weekend creative being born, it's always
Hmm.
been portraits. So portraits has always been my jam as far as my personal work. So I'm still doing that to this day, and still photographing like influencers and stuff. So like it's actually kind of night and day, like my style for my personal work and then weekend creative. So like weekend creative, it's like the marriage of like both me and Ellie's style that like we both love, which is very like
Mm.
colorful and bright and like you know, and it's like a whole different genre, right? Like for Weekend Creative, it's strictly product. We do work with models here and there, but it's still in the focus of like product. Whereas
Hmm.
like what I do personally is still very much like, you know, street, like edgy portraits and like fashion.
Hmm.
So yeah, I mean, it's actually kind of nice to like have two different things where like I can satisfy like, you know, my like moody portrait, like
Okay.
stuff that I enjoy, and then like, you know, then get into the studio and create something really colorful and bright.
Hmm.
So, but it's funny because I think, you know, like all of us, I think it takes a while for us to find our style. And especially like with our business, I think we, you know, we went like in a couple different ways, you know, but we knew that we liked this shadow look, like kind of like as if you were outside, right? Like in the sun, like direct sunlight. And I
Hmm.
think over time we realized that that was like our signature style. And I remember, I think, I can't remember if somebody had mentioned it to us or some, you know, or what had happened, but they were kind of like, oh, like it's almost like, you know, your style is very much like a weekend vibe, right? Like you're outside in the sun and it's fun, you know, like weekends are fun. And I think, you know, we try to infuse that into our work. And so, but it wasn't
Hmm.
always like that. You know, when we look back at our work in the very beginning, we're like, ooh, you know, what was that?
Ouch.
Yeah, but it takes a while. I mean, and I think it just comes with time and experience.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So then did were you and Ellie already working before like the name We Can Create was a thing, and like that came from the style, or is it We Can Create and then that defined the style afterwards?
I think it defined the style afterwards because, yeah, I mean, we were working before Weekend Creative, right? We were working on editorials, fashion editorials, and like, and I remember once we were like serious about creating our business, then we like sat
Hmm.
down and we were, the first thing I think that I remember that we did was like, okay, there is a what do you call those craft fairs that happen like in San
Hmm.
Francisco. Like I don't know if you're familiar with Renegade or West Coast Craft, but they're like
Hmm.
those big craft fairs where like a ton of brands, you know, set up shop and like usually what the way that the reason that they, you know, do those craft fairs is because most of the time shops will come in and like for wholesale, right? It's like it's meant for wholesale, but like people can also come, like just regular consumers, and buy stuff from them. And
Hmm.
so like we were like, that's coming up. We need to like get our business in order, you know, get our business cards, pick a name, get a website,
Hmm.
you know, because we were like, okay, if we go to these craft fairs, then we can pitch ourselves to these brands, right, to work with them. So I remember we sat down and we were like having the hardest time with our name.
Hmm.
We, I remember, I think we came down to like three names and we just like went around to all of our friends asking which one they liked. And
Hmm.
then I think Ellie was the one who on Pinterest, she found this like random, like, you know, those like little patches that you can like put um, on like a denim jacket or something. And
Okay.
it said like something available for weekends or something, and she saw the week, like she saw that and was like, weekend, that is our name. Because at the time when we were doing all of that, we were actually only working Mondays and weekends. And
Hmm.
so we were like, wait, how perfect. Like we like Weekend Creative was born on the weekends because that's the only time that we had to work, because we both worked part-time jobs at the, or like Ellie actually worked a full-time job at the time. So she was working full-time at the magazine while I had part-time
Hmm.
jobs. And so it was like perfect. And then yeah, I think our style just kind of like developed after that, and it all just like made sense. Like we've been able to like, you know, kind of use our name in so many different parts of our business, and it's all kind of
Hmm.
like worked together. But I think, yeah, I think the style kind of like came after, and it kind of just like clicked,
Hmm.
you know, and made sense, and we're like, yeah, that totally matches, that
That
works.
works. For
Yeah.
sure. That's all cool. So do you all still will both still just work on weekends now? Like after 3 years, where has it kind of taken
No.
over?
So yeah, we this is our full-time job now, thankfully. So we, I think it might have been, it doesn't feel that long ago, but I guess it was last year. Last year, my partner Ellie was the one who, she quit her job fully. I think it was in March of last year. And the reason being too was that, so a year into our business, we had a friend who, she came to us, and she's also a photographer in the area. And she was like, hey, like, I'm looking for a studio, and I'm looking for a studio that I can like share with other photographers to kind of like help with rent, you know?
Mhm.
And so we're like, oh my gosh, that's cool. Like, we're not even like, I don't know if we're ready for a studio. Like, we're not like making that much money. It was just like a crazy thing, but we're like, sure, like, why not? Let's think about it. And it ended up working out that we got our first studio. And
Mhm.
the photographer that we were talking with, she ended up actually backing out of the studio thing because she was buying a house and like all this other stuff. So ended up
Mhm.
that we like got the studio ourselves, and we've never owned a studio. So we had nothing to show that we could actually pay rent.
Oh.
So this landlord like took a chance on us, like literally took a chance. So
Mhm.
I don't know, I think us getting the studio, I think was it, yeah, last year in January, was kind of like the kick in the pants that we needed for us to like,
Mhm.
actually be serious about this. And,
Yeah.
now we had bills to pay as a business. So we were like, okay, now we need to work. And so I think Ellie was the first one to be like, okay, if I'm going to like spend a lot more time on this and like really work on outreach and like client outreach and, cold pitching and all that stuff, she
Mhm.
needed to quit her job. So she quit her job first. And uh, I didn't follow that quickly after because I just needed some security. So I slowly like weaned off of my old job.
You go
Um,
set it up, and I'll be there later.
yeah, well, it kind of made sense too, right? Because she was the one that kind of focuses on like, she's the one in communication with clients, because she's the one working with them on concepts and art directing, and all that stuff. And so
Mhm.
it made sense that she would be the one to kind of, go first. And so she did that, and then I followed last September. But now this is our full-time job, and we don't work weekends now. Now we're just, somebody joked and was like, you guys should call yourselves weekday creative then. Because we work on the weekdays now, which is kind of nice. I mean,
Yeah.
we can enjoy our weekends now. So yeah.
Mhm. For sure. So I guess being like two creatives that you are, right?
Hmm.
I guess what makes you both a business versus just being like two freelancers working together?
Yeah. So, well, I think because we work together as a team, right? I don't think Weekend Creative could happen without both of us. Um,
Mm.
because of what we do, like our roles, like I mean, I do the photography and the lighting and post-production, whereas Ellie does, all the pre-production communication with clients and all that kind of stuff. So
Mhm.
I don't think we would be like Weekend Creative would not be without one or the other, it'd be really difficult. So
Mhm.
I think just like it's kind of like Weekend Creative has become like a marriage between like both of us, in the sense that we're both working on the same thing, together. And we're
Mhm.
kind of in all parts of the business, right? Like we communicate about like pretty much everything.
Mhm.
So I think that's where the difference is. Also, I mean, like, when we were first starting, we were like, okay, we need to see like how are we going to register ourselves as a business, and the only option was an LLC. So
Mhm.
that's kind of what we went with. And yeah, I guess, yeah, I mean, it's just like we work together on everything. So I think that's where the difference is. Sometimes, like, if you're working within an agency where there's multiple different kinds of people, like maybe
Mm.
like each person would take on different projects, whereas like we work on the same project, we're working on everything together.
Mhm.
So I think that's where the difference is for sure. And we just like,
Mhm.
we very much like rely and support one another, so like,
Mhm.
even though she is the one that is doing the majority of the concepts and styling and all that stuff, I still support her, right? I still do certain
Mhm.
things, there's and vice versa, right? She helps me we both tag team when we're shooting, so she'll help me with things and vice versa.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's very much a partnership and a team thing when it
Mhm.
comes to Weekend Creative.
That's cool. That's hella cool. Yeah, no, I feel like every other question like it always comes back to like you two is like a team, right? It's never just you. It's like, oh wow, you guys
Yeah, and
really are in
actually now
this
that I'm
together.
thinking about it, like Weekend has we in it. So it's very much
Hmm.
like a we thing, like it's both of us together. So it's never an I, like yeah, we work on
Hmm.
certain things separately, but like at the end of the day we come together and do this
Yeah,
thing.
one Saturday, one Sunday, and then
Yeah,
you get the
yeah,
other
there we
weekend.
go.
That's it. That's just the thing now. You both have to get that T-shirt, do that shoot, and like we are the weekend. But
I know it's surprisingly hilarious how much our name has like come into play with like all the things like as a brand, really. Like even our studio, we
Mhm.
call it, because we rent out our studio too. We make it rentable for other photographers in the area because we have always felt like, man, there's nothing like necessarily out there where, like in our studio, for example, like there are other photography studios out there that are amazing and great, and we use them before we had ours. But there's none out there that has like a full prop wall, where like you can actually use stuff.
Mhm.
Most of the time, like you go to a studio and you bring your own things,
Yeah.
except like the lighting and all that kind of stuff. But so that was, I think, yeah. But like for example, yeah, our studio, like it's named Little Sunday Studio, right? And like our community, like our Patreon, like our memberships, it's Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and like all these things that like have played in
Mhm.
within our name. So it's been fun to kind of, it was really like a perfect name, I think, for us.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it was like going all the way back to the Deja content, like that kind of just became like your guys' just
Hmm.
well, brand, right? At this point.
Yeah, brand at this point. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's really fun.
So you guys do consulting for other artists.
Hmm.
I guess in general, after doing it for 3 years, even being your own artist and working with others, I guess what is kind of one thing you feel is necessary for an artist to move forward just in their own progression? What's something that's holding them back from progressing just in general?
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of things I could say, but one of the things that I think we both learned is that it's okay to say no. I think it's okay to say no to projects, when we're starting out. And I think, I mean, for everyone, I think it's very normal for people when they're starting out that they say yes to everything because they want experience and all that stuff. But I think at some point you have to hit a point where you need to say no to things because your sanity and your dignity is more important. Because
Yeah.
once you start seeing red flags with clients or like certain things, you know at the end of the day, you want to work with people that will value you and value the work that you're creating. So it's okay to say no to people that you can tell that they don't, or they're lowballing you, or you know they're not compensating you fairly. I think that's really scary. You think it's scary to turn away work, but I think it's important for you to grow and for you to make room for the projects that are worth it. I think that's definitely number one thing that we've learned. And also like always be continuously like raising your prices. Like with time you're going to gain more experience. You're going to refine your process. So I think, just like understanding that you're growing, and so you should be, getting paid more. And yeah. Yeah, I think that for sure. And then I think for people who are starting, um you know just like it's you're never going to feel ready. I think no one's ever feeling ready. So you just have to do it. Because unless you want to get stuck like us, we could have started this probably a long time ago, but we like joked about it for too long and always felt like felt like we weren't ready, but you
Mhm.
just have to do it. You just have to go for it and then go from there.
Mhm.
So I think that's yeah. Yeah, hopefully that was good.
Cool. Yeah, I feel like on your guys' podcast, who wants to listen to it, like that seems like their current theme of like, why are you taking gift cards for payment? Like you should be
Oh my
charging.
God. Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And I mean, a lot of it comes down to just like knowing your self-worth, right? Like knowing your worth. And yeah, valuing yourself. Value yourself. How do you expect other people to?
Mhm.
You know? So, yeah.
Very cool. Well, I appreciate it. That's another soundbite I'm gonna be using for opening. No, I appreciate talking to you. I feel like a lot of guests I've been having on here, other artists, but I feel like there is another business aspect to it, right? And like you mentioned, like one is like, we'll charge if
Yeah.
you're still a professional, right?
Yeah, you're still a professional. You are exchanging a service, and the services that you give or the product that you give like is worth it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm glad I wanted to bring more business people on here that like also get it, but also like are savvy on that aspect as well.
Yeah,
So,
for sure.
yes, I appreciate it. Well, Arabella, it is the weekend, so I will give you back your weekends.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
This was really great. Thank you for having me.
Of course, I appreciate it.
Awesome.
Awesome. Well, have a good one. I'll talk to you soon.
All
Bye.
right. Bye-bye.